Welcome to this video. In the following minutes, I'll tell you some of the most important terms that you need to talk about poetry. First of all, I'll introduce some words that we need if we want to talk about the form or the content of a poem. Every poem is written by someone. We call this person the author of the poem. You can often find his or her name under the heading of the poem that is called title. The author of our example poem is Shel Silverstein. The title of the poem is Sick. I'll read the poem for you now before I start talking about it. Sick by Shel Silverstein. I cannot go to school today, said little Peggy Ann McKay. I have the measles and the mumps, a gash, a rash, and purple bumps. My mouth is wet, my throat is dry. I'm going blind in my right eye. She said my tonsils are as big as rocks. I've counted 16 chicken pox. And there's one more, that's 17. And don't you think my face looks green? My leg is cut, my eyes are blue. It might be asthmatic flu. I cough and sneeze and gasp and choke. I'm sure that my left leg is broke. Now let's talk about some terms that describe the body of the poem. A single line of the poem is called a verse. You don't count the title and the author of the poem as verses. The example poem used in this video has 14 lines, so it has 14 verses. A group of these verses is called a stanza. Our poem here consists of 3 stanzas. All of these stanzas include rhymes. That's what we call it if the sound of 2 or more words is the same. The word plew rhymes with flew in our example poem. The word choke rhymes with broke. The rhymes change from poem to poem. Sometimes the first line rhymes the second, but in some cases the first line would rhyme with the third line instead. The regular pattern of the end rhyme is called a rhyme scheme. It is often marked by lowercase letters in alphabetical orders, as you can see in the examples below. We talk about rhyming couplets if one line of the poem rhymes with the following one. As long as they include the same sound, you use the same letters to name them. Plew rhymes flew in our example, so we name this rhyming couplet with a lowercase a. The following couplets are called B, B, C, C, D, D, E, E, F, F, and so on in alphabetical order. In my second example, you can find an alternate rhyme. The line roses are red does not rhyme with the following one, but with the one right after. The second line rhymes with the fourth one. Therefore, the rhyme scheme is A, B, A, B, and it would go on with C, D, C, D, E, F, etc. The third example shows an enclosed rhyme with the pattern A, B, B, A, C, D, D, C, E, F, F, E, and so on. The first line of the stanza rhymes the last one, and the 2 verses in the middle rhyme with each other. The next topic I want to talk about is the meter. The meter is the rhythm and the rhythmic structure of a verse. The 2 most famous meters are the iamb and the trachee. The U symbol stands for an unstressed syllable. The slash symbol represents a stressed syllable. A iamb always starts with an unstressed syllable, which is followed by a stressed one. The trachee, on the opposite, starts with a stressed syllable that is followed by an unstressed one. Listen to how I read the 2 example sentences. Whose woods these are, I think I know. Tell me not in mournful numbers. Now let's take a closer look at the word number. You learned this word once, and you know that it is pronounced number, and not number. If you pronounce it correct, which is number, you can hear that the first part of the word is the stressed one, whereas its end is unstressed. The slash and the U symbol represent this. Sometimes lines don't follow rhymes or rhythm. In this case, we call them free verses. They are still an artistic expression, as you can see in the example. Once a snowflake fell on my brow and I laughed it so much and I kissed it and it was happy and called its cousins and brother and a web of snow engulfed me then. The text still looks like a typical poem, it just doesn't have rhymes. That's what we call a free verse. If we talk about the content of a poem, we often use the term theme. It describes the message or main topic of the poem and what the poem is trying to teach you. Famous themes that are often used in poetry are, for example, love, death, and friendship. If you know the story about Romeo and Juliet, you probably realize that the theme of the book is love. Maybe you even read Shakespeare's Hamlet or Macbeth in school. Their theme is revenge. All poems create a feeling in the reader when he or she reads it. How would you feel if you hear this? It was a dark and stormy night. Isn't that kind of scary? We call this the mood of a poem. In the sentence, the sun shines brightly and the birds were singing, the mood is definitely happier than in the first example. Now you already know the words that you need in order to talk about the form and the content of a poem. In the following part of this video, I will tell you about some devices that are often used in poetry to talk about the language, imagery, and style of poems. They're called literary devices. Authors sometimes use similes in their poems. A simile is a comparison of two things with the word like or as. In the sentences, he swims like a fish and he swims as fast as a fish. A male person's swimming style is compared to the one of a fish that spends all of his life inside the water. Sometimes, authors compare two things without using the markers like or as. In this case, we talk about a metaphor. The sentence, "He's a big fish in a small pond," is such a metaphor because it describes a person who's important within a small group or community. Have you ever heard of a flame that is dancing? Sometimes authors of poetry give human qualities to things or animals. People can dance, flames cannot dance or waltz in reality. We call this literary device a personification, giving human qualities to an animal or thing. Sometimes sounds are repeated at the beginning of a few words. In the sentence, Sam saw something scary, all words start with an S sound. This device, used by multiple authors, is called alliteration, the repetition of a sound at the beginning of words. Maybe you know from your native language that a dove represents peace and a rose often stands for love. If a rose is used in poetry to talk about love, we call this a symbol. Has your mom ever said, "I already told you this 1,000 times," although she only told you once? Mine has. This phenomenon is called an exaggeration in English. If people talk about things in poetry in a more extreme way than they actually are, we call this exaggeration and this literary device a hyperbole. A hyperbole is an exaggeration. It's used when people talk about something in a more extreme way than it actually is. Within the last few minutes, you've heard a lot of terms, and I know it's not that easy to remember all of them. But when you work with literary texts and poems over and over again, and you try to analyze the form and the content of them, you'll be able to remember these terms one day. Thanks for watching this video.